He sought revenge for his daughter's death. In a fit of rage, he grabbed a fallen pen nearby and struck Wang with all his might. The fatal blow ended everything, leaving Wang collapsing on the spot. The story rewinds to 1 month earlier, where we meet Jia, a young girl living with her father Li. Jia's mother had passed away many years ago, and since then, Li had devoted himself to raising his daughter with deep and unwavering love. One morning after breakfast, Jia got ready to go to school. On the way to drop her off, Li gently reminded her to focus on her studies and work hard to achieve good results. During the conversation, Jia expressed her desire for a dog, explaining that most of her friends had one. However, Li kindly explained that their circumstances were different, and reminded her that owning a dog requires a lot of responsibility, from feeding it to taking it for walks. Jia insisted that if Li bought her a dog, she would take care of it herself after school. After some consideration, Li finally agreed. After dropping Jia off at school, he went to work. Li worked at a construction company, where he spent the whole day designing and building projects. Meanwhile, after school, Jia got caught up playing with her friends and lost track of time. In the evening, Li was busy with work but remembered to text Jia, reminding her to come home quickly because it was about to rain. Upon receiving the message, Jia hurriedly left the playground where she was having fun with her friends. Her friends escorted her to the nearby station where they said their goodbyes and left her to continue her journey home alone. Jia boarded the subway, enjoying the ride with a sense of excitement and independence. When the train reached the station, she got off and started walking home. However, the sky quickly darkened, and before long, a heavy downpour drenched the streets, forming puddles along the way. Jia pulled her coat tightly around her, trying to stay warm and dry. Meanwhile, Li finished his workday, confident that Jia was safe at home. When he arrived, he went straight to her room, hoping to find her there. But the empty room left him shocked. Anxiety surged within him as Li began searching the house, calling out for Jia while trying to figure out where she might be. But he couldn't find her anywhere. Li tried calling Jia, but her phone went straight to voicemail, which only made him more anxious. Without hesitation, he called Jia's friend to check if they knew anything. They informed him that they had left her at the train station, and this news sent Li's heart racing with fear. He rushed to the station, his eyes scanning the area desperately for any sign of his daughter, constantly calling her name as the minutes dragged on. The next morning, the situation became even more alarming. Several locals noticed something unusual on the nearby river. As they got closer, they discovered a body floating on the water. Further adding to the grim and tense atmosphere, Officer Jun and his team quickly arrived at the scene to investigate. As they approached, Jun was horrified to recognize the body as Jia's, wrapped in plastic. His heart tightened. After examining the scene, he determined that the body had been in the water for at least 34 hours. With seriousness and caution, Jun instructed his team to review all missing persons reports, hoping to find more clues to unravel this heartbreaking case. A short while later, Officer Jun called Li to the hospital. When Li arrived and saw his daughter's body, tears streamed down his face uncontrollably. He couldn't believe that the lively girl, the one he had just laughed and shared love with yesterday, was now gone forever. Overcome with pain, Li held his daughter's lifeless body, crying endlessly. Jun gently asked Li if Jia had a boyfriend, hoping to find more clues for the investigation, but Li only shook his head, completely broken and confused. He couldn't understand why anyone would be heartless enough to harm his beloved daughter. The loss was so overwhelming that Li was nearly brought to his knees, left with countless haunting questions about the mystery surrounding Jia's tragic fate. When Jia's body was examined, the autopsy report revealed a disturbing truth. 2 people were involved in her death. Officer Jun, noticing that Li was drowning in grief, decided not to disclose this detail to him. He understood that Li was completely broken, as if the entire world had abandoned him, leaving him alone in his unbearable pain. Li was tormented by feelings of guilt, believing that if he had gone to pick up Jia himself, she might have been safe. An assistant officer tried to comfort him, reassuring him, "Don't worry, we'll find the culprit." The next day, Jun and his team returned to the location where Jia's body had been found. Jun analyzed the situation, speculating that the perpetrator must have hurriedly discarded her body with the intention of making it disappear completely. However, his plan failed when the body didn't sink as expected. The lower-ranking police officer expressed concern, stating that if the suspects had no prior criminal records, it would be incredibly difficult to track them down. This statement only deepened Jia's worries, but the whole team remained determined to bring justice for Jia. At the police station, they began reviewing the CCTV footage. From this, they discovered the last image of Gia at the train station and noticed a woman loitering outside. Their attention quickly shifted to a white truck parked nearby, raising suspicions. They zoomed in on the footage, trying to get a clear view of the driver's face, and eventually discovered that his name was Leo. The next day, the police arrived at the area where the truck had been parked, near Leo's house. They found Leo busy cleaning inside the truck, an action that caught their attention even more. Upon conducting a search, they discovered Gia's phone inside the vehicle. Leo quickly stuffed the phone into his pocket, a suspicious move that further fueled their doubts. The police decided to interrogate Leo's father, who owned and sometimes drove the truck. The tension was clear on Leo and his father's faces as they faced the police, a sign that something unusual was being concealed. Leo hurried into the house and locked himself in his room, his mind drifting back to that night when Gia was walking alone. Leo and his friends, Wang and another acquaintance, were sitting in their truck when they happened to spot her. They felt excited, craving a thrill, and decided to approach her. The three of them quickly got out of the truck, and under the cover of darkness, they grabbed Gia from behind, causing her to lose consciousness. They put her in the truck and drove to Wang's house, laying her down on the bed. At that moment, Leo received a call from his father, asking him to drive home. He felt uneasy about leaving his friends alone with Gia. Reluctantly, Leo told Wang and the other friend that he had to go home. Inside, a wave of fear rose in him, worried that his friends might do something terrible to Gia. Wang and the other friend mocked him, reminding Leo that since he was the one driving, he would be implicated if anything happened. Meanwhile, Lee was drowning in despair after losing his daughter. The heart-wrenching pain kept him unable to stop thinking about Gia. One day he found himself riding the subway she had taken on her final trip. As for Leo, while traveling, he suddenly saw a news report on TV announcing the discovery of Gia's body in the river. Panic immediately took over him. He rushed to meet his friends, hoping for support. However, Leo's friends coldly told him that if Gia were still alive, she would have definitely reported them to the police. To protect their secret, they admitted to killing her and warned Leo to stay silent about what had happened. In a fit of rage and guilt, they attacked Leo when he hinted that they had done something wrong by taking Gia's life. Unable to bear the torment inside, Leo decided to take action. He took Gia's phone and went to the riverbank, where her body had been discovered. Filled with regret and despair, Phil sent a message to Lee from Gia's phone, revealing the truth that his daughter had been killed by Wang and himself. He also provided Lee with Wang's address before throwing the phone into the river, hoping to erase any trace of his involvement. Meanwhile, Lee, consumed by the need to find answers, received the shocking message. After being unable to reach Wang by phone, he immediately went to Wang's house to confront him, only to find the door locked. Lee remembered that Leo had mentioned a key, so he used it to enter the house. Once inside, he began searching everywhere, determined to find a clue. Just then, Wang arrived and spoke to someone on the phone. Lee quickly hid, his heart pounding as he continued his search. In one room, he found Gia's bag, and overwhelming sadness hit him, making him choke up. When his eyes landed on Wang's computer, a surge of anger rose within him as he realized that Wang might have recorded what had happened to Gia. Wang sat at his desk, reviewing the video he had recorded on that horrific night, seemingly without any remorse for his actions. He believed he was untouchable because he was only 17. However, driven by pain and anger, Lee realized he couldn't sit idly by. He was consumed with the desire for revenge for what had happened to his beloved daughter. Without hesitation, Lee charged at Wang, fury boiling inside him. The two faced off, and immediately, a fierce battle erupted between them. In a fit of rage, Lee grabbed the baseball bat and swung it violently at Wang, ending his life instantly. Chaos engulfed the scene, the echoes of the struggle reverberating through the space, and Lee became fully aware of the horrifying act he had just committed. After a brief moment of silence, he tried to regain his composure. He quickly snapped a photo of Wang to document the confrontation, then stealthily took his phone. After changing clothes to avoid suspicion, Lee left the house and sent a fake message from Wang's phone, pretending to be him. He informed his friends that he would be leaving town to deliver a car and asked them to meet him at Wang's house. At the same time, the police team, under the direction of Officer June, began investigating the crime scene. When they arrived at Wang's house, they discovered a shocking video that Wang had recorded, not only about Gia but also about two other girls he had assaulted. This evidence raised more concerns about the case and brought up many questions regarding Wang's dark past. Officer June then tried calling Lee, but he didn't answer. The investigators found a blood-stained outfit in Lee's house, leading them to suspect that he might be involved in Wang's murder. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, June and his team intensified their efforts to apprehend Lee. They also decided to arrest Wang's friend, realizing the possibility that he could be involved in the crimes. The parents of his friend were summoned to the police station for questioning. They were wealthy and influential people. When June explained the crimes their son was accused of, they immediately reacted, quickly defending him by saying he was just a kid, and such things could happen at his age. He wouldn't have done anything wrong if he hadn't been provoked by the girls. They insisted on downplaying the seriousness of the situation. June, feeling frustrated and angry at their denial, stood up in fury. He knew the truth about the brutal actions that had taken place and was determined to keep fighting for justice. As they were about to leave, the father of another victim approached and confronted them. "You killed my daughter," he shouted, his voice choked with anguish. The father revealed that Wang had also committed a crime against his daughter, blackmailing her to keep quiet about the abuse she had endured. Ashamed and desperate, the girl had eventually taken her own life by jumping from a building. Meanwhile, Lee arrived at a secluded rental house, a place he often went to escape from the world around him. Holding Wang's USB, Lee discovered a video revealing the brutal actions Wang had taken against a girl in a nearby garage. Filled with anger and desperation, Lee took a photo and immediately headed to the garage. Upon arrival, the mechanics refused to provide any information unless he paid them. Frustrated and unable to hold back, a fight quickly broke out. During the scuffle, one of the workers was shot in the leg, causing chaos and panic among everyone. In the chaos, the injured worker revealed a location he often visited, although he admitted he didn't know much about it. As Lee continued searching for information about his actions, a woman watching TV recognized him and decided to help. When Lee left, she secretly checked the videos on his laptop to learn more about the situation. However, when Lee returned, she was being interrogated by a group of people about his presence in her house. She calmly denied any information related to Lee, insisting that no new man had moved in. Realizing that she knew about his situation, Lee told her that he didn't need to seek justice on his own because, in the end, the police would catch the criminals and punish them. She advised him to surrender, but he emphasized that if he didn't act immediately, the police would catch them, but they might only serve a few years in prison before being released, then get married, have children, and live their lives. "But what about my daughter? She'll never come back," Lee sighed in despair. Meanwhile, Officer June discovered a video on the USB drive showing Lee in a hotel with clear footage of his friend. This led to an arrest warrant for his friend. However, Lee remained determined for revenge. He went to the hotel with the help of the woman who had sheltered him, and in the end, he managed to escape the police's pursuit. Lee arrived at the hotel, gun firmly in hand, waiting for his friend. When the police arrived, they couldn't find Lee but discovered a panicked girl. She accused that her friend had tortured her and filmed their confrontation. A junior officer attempted to call the girl's family, but she immediately objected, terrified, insisting that her friend had threatened to release the video online. At that moment, she received a call from her friend, and in her fear, she recounted everything, revealing that the police were nearby. Realizing he needed to escape, he jumped onto his motorcycle, but Lee was ready. In a decisive move, Lee aimed and shot at the bike, causing him to lose control and crash to the ground. Dazed but undeterred, he quickly got up and ran deep into the nearby forest. Meanwhile, Officer June discovered Lee and immediately gave chase. When Lee realized the police presence, he turned and fled. He dashed down the stairs with heavy footsteps, desperately trying to escape. June shouted, demanding that Lee stop, but Lee kept running, desperately yelling, "They did terrible things to my daughter. I can't let them get away." In Lee's mind, the law seemed powerless, and he believed that if he didn't take action himself, those responsible for his daughter's death would continue to live freely while she was gone forever. June, torn between his duty as a police officer and his deep empathy for Lee's pain, stopped and silently watched. Instead of using violence or force, he decided to let Lee go, his heart heavy as he witnessed a father overwhelmed by grief and hatred. Later, June spoke with an officer about a heartbreaking case from the past. They mentioned 3 teenage boys, 2 of whom had attacked another boy so severely that he died. As a result, both were only sentenced to 15 years in prison and are now free. This case left a deep mark on June, reminding him that the justice system sometimes fails to deliver true justice. At the same time, Leo received a call from his friend, asking for money and telling him to meet at the police station. Leo reassured him that he hadn't revealed anything to the police, unaware that the officers were nearby and had overheard the entire conversation. The next day, June and his team lay in wait at the police station, waiting for him to appear. Lee was also hiding nearby, holding his gun firmly, determined to seek revenge. When Leo arrived to deliver the money to him, police suddenly stormed in to arrest him. Amid the chaos, He sensed the danger and panicked, running away. Lee quickly pursued, cornered him, and aimed his gun at him. Terrified, Leo knelt and begged for his life, repeatedly apologizing for what had happened to Jaya. Despite his desperate pleas, Lee's gaze remained fixed in unyielding anger. The police shouted loudly, ordering Lee to lower his gun, but in his blind fury, he pulled the trigger, and the bullet went straight through his eye. In response to Lee's action, an officer fired back, causing Lee to fall to the ground. As for him, he sustained a serious wound but remained alive, losing one eye. A year later, Police Chief June and his colleagues visited the memorial for Lee, erected to honor him. In the quiet, solemn space, June reflected on the challenges of parenthood. Having children is easy, he said, but teaching them to live right is the hardest thing. The atmosphere was heavy with the weight of the tragic story that Lee left behind, as everyone reflected on the pain of loss and the flaws in the justice system. The film ended, leaving the audience in deep contemplation and thought about the events that unfolded and the consequences they brought for all those involved.